Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming at you again on a Monday at 9:22. Monday morning, coming at you from Film Fanatic headquarters. Thanks again for everyone's support over these last couple of months. It's been really sweet with learning this whole thing. Been trying to mix up the content here with the show. The focus always being mainly on the science fiction horror exploitation world. But again, I like to think I have a pretty wide range of tastes with films and also music. So I try to show aspects of that on this channel. It's I remember I had a friend one time. He had commented when he had seen some of the things that I'm into as far as different styles of music, different bands, and then also with films. He was like, I would say you're a pretty eclectic guy, and I thought that was pretty funny. But I kind of look at it as a compliment. It's the best thing is always you don't have to like something. You can dislike something, and I'm glad in our world at least. I wouldn't want to live in a world where everybody has the same opinion and everybody has the same taste because that would be pretty boring. But I think one thing to be said too is, people to just have generally have an open mind to checking out new material. Recently, I met up with a friend who I had not seen in a very long time, and I met them at the show where it was this house party, and it was this collection of all of these really, wild kind of avant-garde bands and groups. Some of the music was on the the fringe side of things, kind of like harsh noise. I guess you can kind of consider it like harsh noise music. And I met and saw this friend that I hadn't seen in probably like I don't know 15 years or so. It was pretty crazy. And then after I realized, oh, I do know this person, I was like, oh, and then kind of reconnected. And then the other night we got together and went out for some beers, and I was talking with them about how, you know, about music and various other things. And this friend also is, I found out, is also a writer for this British music magazine. And she had gone to a concert recently where she saw the Killers. And I was like, wow, like that's really cool. Like having, meeting somebody or knowing somebody who has that kind of range of tastes. Like I think that's pretty darn cool. And I think that's like really attractive when you're, for me at least personally, when I meet somebody who, you don't have to like this or like, or you don't have to like this particular kind of thing, or it's maybe not your cup of tea, but just that a person is open to checking out a wide range of different things, and also with film, especially with film. I just think that's super cool and a great quality to have because I feel like, there's less borders now, like I think with the internet, so there's more opportunity to be exposed to lots of new things. But I also feel on one hand, people are, uh, to a degree, and it's not a broad generalization, but I think I've seen it where people are, to a degree, like insulated, and they want to like what they like, and that's fine, but they, outside of those perimeters, they, without really checking it out, they make a judgment on it, on that, and they kind of poo poo on that thing that's maybe pretty abstract, without necessarily giving it a chance. So it's always great when I meet somebody who is willing to give it a go and check out something that is, maybe polar opposite to what they might be used to listening to. And I just think that's, awesome. It's that cliche thing of, variety is the spice of life. And so I just think that is one of the coolest traits that a person can have. And so when my friend had said to me quite a few months ago, "Well, I think you have like some pretty eclectic tastes," I look at that as a really great compliment because just not even being it's not even from for me being a musician or artist, if you want to call it that. It's purely based on the being a fan. Like I consider myself a connoisseur or a lover of media, film and music specifically. So and it's just for me it's just from a fan's perspective. That's it. Your common everyday person who's a fan of these things, and so I look at that as like a cool compliment. So, but anyway, so this show, this is a show today that I've been wanting to get to for actually quite a few months. The topic of today's show is going to be Lucio Fulci's The House by the Cemetery. It came out in 1981. I've talked a lot. I've done a few reviews and videos on some of Lucio Fulci's movies. I did a show on the New York Ripper quite a few months ago. I also, when I first started to kind of get this channel going, probably in the fall, late fall, or maybe even it was technically summertime still. I also did The City of the Dead or Gates of Hell by Lucio Fulci. That movie has two different titles: The Gates of Hell and The City of the Dead. Uh, those are just amazing films. And since I been buying a lot of Blu-rays this past 3 years or so, and especially with diving back into the whole like horror exploitation world, I rediscovered a lot of Lucio Fulci movies that I grew up watching that were on back in the days of the VHS craze, and some movies that were on cable at that time. Lucio Fulci was definitely one of those guys that House by the Cemetery was a movie I remember always seeing when I was a kid. I would rent it on VHS. The Gates of Hell was another one. The New York Ripper was one. There's a few others. But it's been so cool, like especially in this day and age where I referred to it with all of these reissues of all of these great exploitation classics. It's like a golden era right now. It's like a renaissance, like a modern day renaissance. And it's, if you're a fan of these films, and I think generally movies in general, it's like a renaissance. It's a pretty amazing period that we're living in. That on one hand you have movies and filmmakers, some of them being really really successful, still making money with all of the challenges that are in the way of artists these days. Still making money by getting people to theaters, but then you also have lots of filmmakers that are struggling to get their work out there, and let alone with distribution, where you're competing also with the streaming services. So it's always a challenge. And on the other side, or the plus side of things, being that technology is where it's at, and on one hand, it's way easier for filmmakers to make movies because of technology. The same thing for recording music. You can essentially record pretty good product. If you break things down to its kind of bare minimum now, you can actually record albums and record and make movies on a high-end iPhone these days, and it's so you have access to all this technology. I remember seeing an interview with Joe Bob Briggs, who is like one of the greatest voices out there about for horror, and he was talking about how technology is just so readily available for filmmakers now, and it's unbelievable. Like, and his I remember him saying he was surprised that he felt that there wasn't enough people utilizing that technology, and he he felt like there should be more movies out. So I always thought that was cool. But with all those things happening, all of these movies that were these underground gems. They were kind of long forgotten for many years. Totally low budget, sleazy horror movies, and all the various subgenres in the exploitation world. With you have the giallo films, crime exploitation, the exploitation movies, all the horror exploitation movies. All of these movies that are so underground are getting this like second life, and a lot of films that were forgotten about, or maybe they didn't really get where they didn't at the time when they came out on their initial release, didn't make a profit. But now a lot of these filmmakers are actually making a profit off of these movies that were made 30, 40 years ago. So it's pretty incredible, and that you can now own these movies, and in particular with this show being centered on House by the Cemetery, it's amazing, and the quality of what you're getting is just absolutely incredible. I've talked a lot about there's I love a lot of new things. I love a lot of new films. There's been a tremendous amount of great new horror films, I think, within this past year. There's you know going back even a few years ago, I think the remake of The Invisible Man is one of the best movies that's come out in recent times. I really love X, and also the prequel Pearl, directed by Ty West. I think those two movies are pretty incredible. I really love the Black Phone with Ethan Hawke. That's a very recent movie, really great movie. Another movie by a director of who I love, and I've been following his career for quite a few years. Alex Garland. He released a movie called Men, which I think is a pretty tremendous movie. Those are just some movies I've seen recently within the last few years that I think are pretty outstanding films, and they're all like modern horror films. So I'm always trying to check out new things. I try to keep my finger on that pulse to a degree. I wish I got a chance to see more of those in the film in an actual theater. Those films I feel have been their runs, their actual runtime, or the time or the period that they're actually in theaters doesn't seem to be all that long, because a lot of these films tend to be on the more like independent, low budget, especially like work the work of Ty West. Definitely more indie horror. The A24 releases, which is a really amazing company that puts out all kinds of interesting and original horror films these days. Case in point, Ty West. They put out his last two movies. Seeing a company like that where they take risks, they take creative risk in the horror genre, they seem to be getting behind and augmenting and supporting directors that have these ideas that are pretty original, and they're not like they're 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 taking, I feel, the horror genre and putting it in a contemporary light and moving things forward and giving the viewers something new and original. Even if certain films you might not necessarily like, they're at least trying some new things. They're not really sticking all the time with, like, say, a convention. Another movie I actually really liked, this year as far as new movies and very, with movies with huge budgets. And I've done a show on it, was Halloween Ends. That was probably one of the bigger surprises this year. I went into that with exceptionally low expectations, and I was really surprised with that. So there's been a lot of great, I feel, collection, and I know I'm probably leaving out a couple of movies. Those are the things I can just think of, the movies that just come to my attention when I'm thinking about it. And so I always try to stay up on new stuff, but I typically always my jam and my thing that I always kind of go back to, my overall my favorite period of horror films and all things like related to exploitation are the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Particularly the 70s and 80s. The 70s is probably mid to late 70s to like the early 80s is like, that's kind of where I find myself going. I always find myself going back to those decades as being kind of the golden era of like the exploitation horror world. That's like my jam. And House by the Cemetery for me is is my favorite Lucio Fulci movie and definitely one of my favorite all time horror films. And I've talked about some, just all of the incredible films that were coming out in Italy during that time, particularly like in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. There's so many directors that came out of Italy at that time. Some are still alive, some have passed on, but they released so many great films. And now, with this golden era that we're living in, we're, as fans, we're able to, see all these movies and own them. So it's pretty amazing. I mean, just a pretty general list of all of these great directors that came out, particularly in the 70s and 80s and also 60s, but particularly the 70s and 80s. A lot of the Italian directors, probably the most well-known Italian director, most well-known for Suspiria, is Dario Argento. He's probably the most well-known director in the kind of horror exploitation world in regards to Italian directors. There's a lot of folks out there who are who are fans of horror films, but they might not say know all that much or have taken that deep dive into like the Italian cinema. They you know they might not have been exposed to a lot of that, or been exposed to that period, like those decades, 60s, 70s, and 80s. But usually across the board, everyone knows who Dario Argento is, and that's mainly due to Suspiria being probably the biggest and the most high profile movie out there, and also, I mean, one of the greatest horror movies ever. It set the bar so high, and just one of the greatest directors ever, and he's still going. He's still going strong. So Dario Argento would be the most well known, I would say. Mario Bava is another really fabulous director. I would say probably second in this list. I would say Lucio Fulci is probably the most, right underneath or right behind Dario Argento as probably being the most popular director. So Mario Bava, Lamberto Bava is another great Italian director. Riccardo Freda, Umberto Lenzi, Michele Sovi, Joe D'Amato. Joe D'Amato, real amazing director. I did a show on his film Demons a while back, which is just one of the greatest horror exploitation movies and one of the goriest movies I've seen in recent times. That was a movie I hadn't seen since I was a kid, but I bought that on Blu-ray. Just an amazing movie. Joe D'Amato, Sergio Martino, another incredible director. Bruno Mattei is another director who I really love. He's really known for making some really brutal zombie films. I love the whole zombie genre. I'm mostly into my favorite, I guess, genre, or I guess you could say style in the exploitation world. I love giallo films. I really love giallo films a lot. I've been getting more and more into those. And those films have elements of horror, but they're also pretty. I feel like they've taken a lot from Hitchcock, but they generally have like a real sense of mystery. There's a lot of interesting plot twists. It's usually very highly stylized with like really intricate lighting. There's a lot of there is elements of gore, but typically they have this real interesting narrative. There's always this this level of where the narrative of the story isn't very predictable. There's always some kind of investigative thing about the film. There's also a lot of times like elements of where it's kind of sleazy. Huge giallo fan, but they typically, a lot of giallo films, and that's an Italian style that originated in like the early '60s. Very influential style, and they also giallo films sometimes have some of them are straight up kind of crime movies or straight up mystery, murder, whodunit kind of things. But they also have elements of mystery or elements of science fiction sometimes, and also horror and sex exploitation. Fabulous style of just a really great style. I've been really getting into that, and that's exclusively like an Italian style. And so Bruno Mattei also did a lot of great. Most of what I would say he mostly was well known for making all kinds of great zombie movies. Rodrigo Deodato, Lucio Cazzi, Francesco Barzali, Pupi Avati, Antonio Brancacci, Antonio Margheriti, Giuliano Carmiano, Mario Caliano, Massimo Polio, Aldo Lado, Armando Crispino, Corrado Farina, Ernesto Gastaldi, Silvio Amadio, Romeo Scafolini, Ivan Zukan. I mean, the list is endless. How many directors came out? Directors that I know of and that I've spent more time and I'm more familiar with. Obviously, Dario Argento. I've seen lots of his films. Huge fan of his. Mario Bava is one of my favorites. Lamberto Bava is incredible. Lucio Fulci is probably my favorite. Umberto Lenzi is incredible. Joe D'Amato. Sergio Martino is another favorite of mine. Bruno Mattei. Those are like the directors that I've seen. Probably I've seen most of their work. I'm more familiar with those guys. They're again, that's the fun thing about discovering a lot of these films. Like if I, you know, like when I saw this movie and I bought this last year, and I started, it started bringing back all these memories of my childhood, and then I started, taking a little bit of a deep dive into like, oh, okay, I like Lucio Fulci, and then like Bruno Mattei and a few of these other guys, and I'm like, wow, who's this other director? And then before I know it, I was checking out five or six other Italian directors that came out during that same period that I never heard of, and then also I'd never seen any of their movies. So it just opens up this whole world of like all these cool like discoveries. That's one of the funnest, the most for me one of the most enjoyable aspects of collecting a lot of these movies and getting into it. That's just for me is a tremendous source of inspiration. Um, can't that's probably for me the biggest attraction. But like I said, my favorite Lucio Fulci movie, and this is a show and a movie I've been wanting to cover for quite a while. But there's so many other movies that I've been doing so and other things. So today's the day, and I bought this edition, The House by the Cemetery. This came out in 1981. I bought this edition last year, and it's incredible. This came out through Blue Underground. You can see that there. Blue Underground is a company which I a lot of the films that I've reviewed on this channel are put out by Blue Underground. Blue Underground is probably overall my favorite movie label that specializes in the exploitation world. Bill Luswig, one of my favorite directors, who has made uh, probably my favorite slasher film of all time, Maniac. He started this company. Like, and I started to talk about it before. In the world of exploitation movies, you have the sex exploitation, the real sleazy movies. You even have like nun exploitation movies. You have the crime exploitation movies. You have the giallo films. You have the horror sci-fi exploitation movies, and then you have the slasher exploitation movies. My favorite style, I love all those to death, but my favorite style is has always been the slasher exploitation movie. I just love that image of the masked killer, and that's where there's a high body count, and there's always like where the kills are just brutal, and that's always my favorite kind of element. I'm a huge fan of the gore and practical effects, and those movies really are all about that. But this is definitely like a supernatural movie. This is like for Lucio Fulci, like this is a pretty much a straight up like haunted house kind of movie. It's basically centered on this family that moves into this like kind of old creepy house where the people who lived in the house basically had died, and the father went on this rampage, and he eventually took his own life. But the house kind of takes on his personality, and this family, not knowing the history, move into this house, and it's by the cemetery. And the atmosphere for this film is just incredible. And Blue Underground, like I said, William Luswig, he doesn't really make films anymore. He kind of retired from making films, but he's the one thing he's done, which is just incredible, is he started Blue Underground. And I kind of look at it as almost like a thing of like paying it forward. I've seen interviews with him where he like wants to bring light to a lot of these classic films that inspired him when he was young and when he made these films. He saw a lot of these films. You know, he's a New York guy, and he grew up in New York back when it was the time of like 42nd Street, when it was like a really sleazy, dangerous place, and all the grindhouse cinemas were there. He was a product of that. He used to go to see all of these films there, and that's what helped to inspire Maniac, and also like Maniac Cop and Maniac Cop 2 and Maniac Cop 3 and various other movies he's done. So he started this company, Blue Underground, and he started reissuing all of these great classics that he saw when he was a kid. And so it's just amazing. This package is just incredible. One of the cool things too, I haven't come across it in a while. I'm looking forward to getting more of those. But one of the coolest things about this package is it comes with the soundtrack for the film, and the music is just iconic. It's one of my favorite horror film soundtracks. This is like from 1981, so obviously, there was no CGI. There wasn't, you know, uh, Ableton for production, for music production. So a lot of this stuff was like real primitive 80s technology, and it just has. It's very, being that I'm way into electronic music being my favorite style. This music is kind of in the beginning of that, and so there's all these great synths and just wonderful. But so it comes with the actual soundtrack, which is so awesome. The artwork is just incredible. It's got the slip cover, like a 3D kind of hologram thing, super cool, and it's packed with special features. There's like 3 hours of special features on here, which is incredible. There's 2 discs. It's just it's just amazing. All this great artwork. Um, and I got this brand new, and I got it for a really pretty cheap price. I was pretty impressed. Um, this, like I've said before, this is definitely my favorite Lucio Fulci film. So many great ones. I have quite a few of his movies now, and I'm going to be getting into doing more shows on a bunch of his other films. One of my other ones, upcoming shows that I'll do is The Girl with the Lizard Skin. That's more of a giallo film. It's super trippy and psychedelic, but I love that movie so much. That one was a film of his I did not see. There are actually quite a few of his movies I have not seen because he had a really long and prolific career right up until he passed away. Just incredible. Just incredible. And again, this movie came out in 1981. It stars Catriona Macaulay, Sylvia Cataloni, Paolo Malco, Giovanni Frenzi, Anya Paroni, Giovanni Di Nava, Dagmar Lasender. The uh, the other thing that's so awesome about this, Lucio Fulci was known to be, you know, he was known for the gore in his films. Particularly around the kills, like they're being, just being, incredibly violent and brutal. Movies like The New York Ripper, is probably looked at as like one of his like most notorious films. It's super sleazy and it's super brutal. It's it's the kills, and it's all practical effects. It's all in camera effects. Just amazing. And I think House by the Cemetery, the kills in this film were just brutal, brutal as all hell. The thing that's so cool about this movie is it just the atmosphere that this movie has is just gives it this timeless quality where you're like immersed in this universe. The lighting, the atmosphere, the music, the kills are just incredible. There's like an incredible climax to the end of the story. It truly is like a fully like immersive experience. The quality of this on Blu-ray is just incredible. To think when I saw this when I was a kid on VHS, like on a crappy VHS copy, which was probably like a copy of a copy. Put out all those movies were put out by various distribution companies, and they were kind of exploiting the filmmakers to a degree, even to a degree making their own cuts of the movies. And they were, the quality wasn't good. The picture and the sound was not great, and it was hard to get. These are all Italian films, so it was hard to get the original Italian version. A lot of them were dubbed for American audiences. So, but the other thing that's so awesome about a lot of these Italian and European movies is that with these Blu-rays, is you have the option to watch the film in English subtitles. And I find too, if you get the chance, especially anything foreign in general, I love foreign films, and I've been buying a lot of foreign exploitation movies. I feel like if you watch, like, there's something fun about watching the dubbed version because it adds this kind of cheesy factor to it, and it's entertaining in its own way. But I find over experience, like watching, if you have the choice, when you go to the menu and watching these movies, or in particular this movie, you have the choice of watching like the American dubbed version, or say the Italian version, where it's in the native language, but you can watch it in English subtitles. I find that the stories are very different. If you watch it in its original format, in the original language, I find that the story is more cohesive. It makes more sense. There's certain things that are even that are compared to the American version that are actually left out. And I have found too, or like there's been certain European movies that I've watched where if I've seen the American version, there's these weird kind of plot holes in the story or the narrative, and there's certain things that don't really make sense. But if you watch the European version with English subtitles, suddenly it makes sense and it's more cohesive. So typically, whenever I buy these movies, I don't usually ever watch the American version. I always go for the European version because it's a more concise telling of the story. But yeah, just an amazing movie. This is definitely one of the goriest films I think of his career. New York Ripper is also very, very gory and graphic and super sleazy. The Gates of Hell, I think, is another one that is like ultra gory and brutal. But there's something about The House by the Cemetery that really does it for me. It's mainly because of the atmosphere of this film, and the immersion in this classic kind of ghost story. Just amazing. So this would be, I would say, if you're maybe not familiar with Lucio Fulci as a director or any of his films, and you want to check out something that's super raw and just downright gory and nasty and super fun, this would be like a great starting point to like check out this film, and you know move on and check out his other films. He's predominantly known as a horror film director, and he probably overall most of Lucio Fulci's movies are horror films, but he has done many other styles. He's done kind of like the sex exploitation thing. He's done the giallo thing, and he's even made westerns. He's made some like Nazi exploitation movies. So he's done many different styles, but he's mostly known as a horror director. And overall, that's what I kind of consider him. Even though through his long career, he did venture into many different other genres. But again, this is my favorite Lucio Fulci movie of all time. Just so damn good. So I highly recommend seeing this. And if you can get this edition on Blu-ray, the quality is just outstanding. Picture and the sound is just amazing. And in this particular edition, it's the 3 disc limited edition that I got, and it comes with the film score. So just amazing. So this is Jason Dean. I want to thank everybody for checking out this page and supporting this weird little thing that I do. And if you like and dig this stuff, please comment. I love there's been more and more people commenting on the videos. I love interacting with people. It's all about sharing this fun stuff with you guys. So, and also if you like this channel, please like and subscribe to it. And we will see you next time. Have a great day. Peace.